wins and some lose. I can see it through your...
Hello and welcome back. This is the top 8 of Legacy at General Games. I'm Graham, back again in the booth, and I'm joined here by Matt Larkham.
Hey.
So we've got a couple of different matchups here to be watching. The one that we've got on camera as our feature match is going to be Grixis Delver, the Team Australia variant piloted by Mark Wyther, and he's going to be playing against Martin Keevers on Dragon Stompy.
Yeah, so this should be an interesting matchup. Hopefully there's actually some interaction from the Delver player and they don't just get completely blown out by haymakers, but
Absolutely. So as far as I understand the matchup, we're looking at just Delver wants to interact with the lock pieces that Dragon Stompy are playing early on, and then just do what they normally do and leverage their threats. And obviously Dragon Stompy is wanting to go over the top if they can.
over the top or with, a turn 1 Blood Moon or Chalice on 1.
Yeah, so
something along that line.
It's got a lot of cards which are very, very threatening. It might end very quickly or it might go very slowly, but you can only hope for the second one though.
Yeah, we can hope for the second one and hopefully give you something relatively entertaining to watch. Here we go.
Looks like they're shuffling up. We've got Mike Wyther, who's actually using, once again, Stephen Stamopoulos' sleeves. They're being triple sleeved, and you can't play Team Australia unless you've got the Australian sleeves.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Looks like they're just having a quick look at exactly what's in their hands. We've got Stifle, Dismember, some Forces of Spell Pierce, and some land from Mark. And Mark is going to be on the play. On the other side, we have... So that was around before. Martin is going to be on the play.
Alright, so we've got a Chromox coming out from Martin. Nice little bit of early ramp.
Yeah, that's the GP promo in this particular variant. And Martin puts behind a Goblin Rabble Master by the look of it.
Yep.
So that means that he's playing one of the more aggressive builds. Some of the more recent versions of Dragon Stompy have been going more for the Very Heaven Prison element and then trying to win by burning out with Chandra while locked under a bridge on both sides.
Oh, fair enough. Well, it looks like we're going to be seeing a Trinisphere.
Trinisphere in Masterwork type, and Mark doesn't know what that card does when it's in that particular printing of it. I imagine that we're going to see the Spell Pierce from his hand come down now, though.
Yes, I believe this Trinisphere is not resolving.
Just with the amount of D&T in the top 8, as Stephen has said, possibly putting some Death and Tax, some Dread of Knights back into our sideboard. So just having a look at what's going on next. You were playing in the tournament early today as well, is that right, Matt?
Yeah, I was attempting to play check pile and failing miserably. For the good old 0-3 drop.
The 0-3 drop? I went the 1-2 drop, but what can be? You'd have to do what you can. And it means that we get to commentate this now, which is good as well.
Yeah.
So doesn't look like
Mark has a threat.
Mark has a threat, so is they playing the control game? See how well that is going to last, so.
Looks like we've got a second Trinisphere from Martin.
Yep, and looks at the spell snare, counts to 3, can't counter it, so goes for the force instead.
Yep.
Might be worth holding up the spell snare, I think, anyway, just to have the option of, if he does play Chalice on 1, it does have the option of countering that. But he leaves up the Forcible in his hand instead.
Yes, as you say. The Stifle is not going to be particularly relevant, so that is also just going to turn into force food.
That's true. There's a little bit of strange things that you can do with it that you don't really see in other matchups. So you might be able to stifle the Chrome Mox so that he can't imprint anything or tap it for mana. You can stifle a Chalice trigger if he doesn't have it on 1, which means that you can cast spells through it. And he's obviously got the Planeswalkers as well, which I believe he's got 4 Chandra, Torch of Defiance there. So not getting burned out by that can be good, but not what the normal use of Chalice of Stifle of countering the fetch lands.
Yeah, no fetch lands in the mono red Dragon Stompy deck. All right, so it looks like we've got
Rebel Master coming down.
Beavers, yep.
And Mark Rifle is going for the Lightning Bolt in hand before it gets the 1/1 token in the pre-combat mains. Pre-combat step,
At the
I believe
beginning
that
of
happens.
combat.
There we go.
Yep. All right. So
Finally got a threat on Mark's side. It's got a true name Nemesis. And that can just sit there and block Martin all day if he needs to. So
actually, it shouldn't be a threat given
yeah,
that
there
he
is
doesn't have a second blue.
there's no blue source on the board, so we might need to call a judge there.
Yep.
We'll just see if we can stop the game. There we go. We've got the judge call. We can hear it from here. That's not quite what we were expecting. One of the disadvantages of having the one non-blue land in the deck. But this is...
sorry.
So continue.
Oh, occasionally, yeah, when you fetch that Badlands, it can feel really good in the moment, and then you color screw yourself out of casting pretty much everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, this is Steven Stamopoulos' deck, and essentially, just because he's added some bigger creatures, he's got a True Name Nemesis, and he's got some Tombstalkers in the list, he just felt that he needed a little bit more mana to be able to cast some of his spells, and added a 19th Sand, which was the Badlands in this case, which occasionally leads to problems like this. So looks like we've rewound. I don't know if we're on Martin. We've rewound entirely. Martin is putting one card back on turn, and it is now Mark's turn before he casts that particular True Name Nemesis. Just revealing it so everyone knows it's there, and then passing back.
All right, so third Trinisphere from Martin.
Yeah, so goes for the Trinisphere. At the moment, Mark's on 3 land, and he also has he has his coloured sources. Martin can't deal with them outside of Blood Moon, so it's a question of whether he wants to let it resolve, and it looks like he has. And he's just going to cast everything for 3 now, including his Force of Wills if anything relevant comes down.
Well, at this point, the only really relevant things are going to be probably Blood Moons, because that will cut him off pretty much all of his coloured mana.
That's right. Martin plays Sim Prodder, which one of those spells which just really needs to be dealt with as soon as possible when it does come down, and he casts a Lightning Bolt for 1 instead of 3.
There we go.
There we go. We get there eventually.
And so, Graham, were you also playing this tournament?
Yeah,
you said you went 1-2.
I went 1-2. I was playing Blue-Red Delver, which is traditionally burn, and then to try and give it a little bit more of a late game plan, I added Tombstalker to it. Didn't really go that well in the matches. I faced Death and Taxes, and faced on camera what looked like a Maverick build, and just didn't quite get there. So Mark draws into another blue source, gets his True Name down, and
now has a clock, so can continue to play his sort of control plan a lot more effectively.
With the way that Martin's deck is set up, it's got a problem where it can only play one spell every turn, and so if you have some way to deal with each of those, then you don't really need to be doing the traditional Delver plan of cantrip, spell. You can just deal with them if they can, and with this Chandra I've got here, that's possibly not going to last long against the True Name we've got on the board.
Very true, and you mentioned earlier possibly stifling a Chandra activation, and I think that is quite a possibility here, given that the Stifle isn't doing much else, and
yeah, that's true.
He's almost up to just hard casting Force of Wills.
Yeah, the problem with that is it still lets the Chandra tick up, but very likely we're going to see the Chandra attack for the next 2 turns rather than the creature. So yeah, we see Lightning Bolt, putting Chandra down to 2, and then dealing with it before it can get its card advantage engine online.
Yeah, the card advantage from Chandra is pretty huge. Ooh.
So Blood Moon locks a lot of Mark's plays out of the game. He does have a Dismember, which obviously is still going to do work, but otherwise we're just going to be sitting here leaning back on
True Name.
on True Name for the rest of this game, I would say.
Because I believe the only castable spells in Mark's deck is now Force of Wills and 1 Lightning Bolt left.
He's used 3 of the Lightning Bolts already. The other thing to keep in mind here is that there's no... Stephen has opted for the Stifle build of this deck, so we're not going to have any young Pyromancers that you could possibly use as well there. And Mark firing off a Force of Will against
the Koth of the Hammer.
Against Koth of the Hammer. So I believe it's just one of the deck. In the deck, it does a few different things. You can plus it to untap a mountain, turns it into a 4/4, and you can attack with that. You can neg to it to add red mana equal to the number of mountains in play, or the neg 6 is pretty much win the game. You neg 5 even, which is tap a mountain, deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Still doesn't get past the True Name, but it does a lot of damage very quickly. And Martin elects to hardcast a Simian Spirit card, which I believe may be left alone.
All right, and we have another a mountain from Martin.
Yeah, this one in the form of an Ancient Tomb. It's a very nice looking deck that he's got there, almost everything in foil from what I can see. I'm not sure if you would go for the the Arabian Nights Blood Moon, or whether you would go for the foil one considering the rest of the deck. What's your opinion on foiling?
So I reckon you've either got to go all foil or no foil.
Okay. So you would go one of the Modern Masters Blood Moon if you were in Martin's deck?
If I was in Martin's shoes and, had money, then yes.
The other fun thing you can do is if you're going down the Arabian Nights route, you can take the Arabian Nights Mountain, the misprinted ones.
Oh, yep.
Have a nice several $1,000 mana base of all basics.
Well, I mean, every other player is playing a several $1,000 mana base, so you may as well tag along, join in the fun.
Yeah, so that is a Collective Defiance. Casting it for a few, we'll just see exactly what the card does. Don't know if we might be able to bring it up on stream. It's a 1 red sorcery for 3. It has Escalate, which means you can pay 1 to use extra modes, and it's got 3 possible modes. Target player discards all the cards in his or her hands and then draws that many cards. Deal 4 damage to target creature, or deal 3 damage to target opponent. So he's escalated it once. Looks like we've gone for the discard option, getting rid of 2 Dismembers and a Force of Will, and that's been targeted on Mark, and that we've done 3 damage to player. So, despite the fact that they're not really doing that much, they're actually keeping very similar life totals, and then Mark just swings in on Martin down to 8.
And what's Mark drawn in his new hand here?
Can't see it yet, but we'll find out in a few moments. So we've got a Daze just drawn off the top. We've got Stifle, 2 land, and a final card, which is
a Deathrite and a Delver. 1 land.
There we go. So we still can't cast any cards in hand, unlike the previous Dismember when we could cast a few of those. And it looks like we're just going to be trading back and forth with the creatures. If Martin gets any burn spell, so either a Fiery Confluence or a Chandra, I think he's very close to winning the game, but instead he holds out his hand and Mark takes the first game. So that was a really good matchup to see.
Yeah, that was a far more interesting game than it could have been. We had a lot of interaction from Mark. Unfortunately, Martin couldn't quite draw enough relevant threats.
Yeah, and it is Martin's birthday today, so we can only wish him well and luck with this particular match. With that said, let's have a look at what they've got in their sideboards. So, Mark's got 2 Abrades, a Flusterstorm, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Marsh Casualties, 2 Pyroblast, 2 Snapcaster Mage, 2 Surgical, and 3 Thoughtseize. What would you be looking at bringing in?
So, I'd probably be looking at bringing in the Abrades, definitely, because they hit a lot of the relevant cards and they can still be cast through a Blood Moon if one resolves.
Yeah.
Although at that point you're in a lot of trouble anyway. The Thought Seizers are definitely coming in because you want to try and hit the relevant cards out of your opponent's hand before they can cast them.
Yeah.
I could see potentially Snapcaster Mages or Surgical Extractions coming in.
Yeah.
Given that Martin is based on playing one big threat and having it resolve and then winning the game off the back of that,
Each turn.
being able to Thought Seize a threat and then Surgical the rest of them away is pretty big.
Yeah, so I think I just saw Mark look at bringing in the Marsh Casualties there. It does hit the Goblin Rabble Masters if they do come down, but otherwise I don't think it does too much against Martin's deck, and it's a very color intensive in colors where you not necessarily where you want to be. So it's interesting that he's chosen to do that. I would be bringing out the Spell Snares personally, and Snapcasters are interesting. They're good if you can get them down before any of the threats like the Blood Moon or the Trinisphere, but otherwise, once those cards are down, they obviously become a little bit worse. And we'll just have a look at what's going on in Martin's side. So on the sideboard, as you can see, we've got 2 Anarchy, 2 Ashen Rider, 2 Boil, 2 Ensnaring Bridge, 2 Fairy Macabre, 1 Friction Revoker, 1 Pithing Needle, 1 Sudden Demise, and 2 Sulfur Elemental. So, the Boils look good, the Ensnaring Bridges look good. Just obviously doing a lot of work. Obviously the Boil won't work if the Blood Moon is down though. Otherwise, there doesn't seem to be a lot that I would want to bring in outside of that.
Yeah, so the Ensnaring Bridge is pretty big in the matchup, given that it's just another must-answer threat. And for those of you who didn't know, because I didn't, Anarchy is destroy all white permanents, so if Martin can get through this round, this will be a huge card against all of the Death and Taxes players, given that there are 3 in the top 8.
That's right. So this is a list I actually gave to Martin myself about a year ago, I think now. And just probably Sulfur Elementals are better, but it's a lot of fun just watching someone's reaction when you cast that card on them. The main problem is just with the taxing effects that Death and Taxes have, it's a little bit hard to cast sometimes, but you also have 4 main deck Fire Confluences, which does a lot of work towards destroying both their creature base and any artifacts they may play. And we're just getting word there from our producer that Jack Jiggins has 1 on table 2. He's on Death and Taxes, and he's gone 2-0 there. To Umezawa's Jitty in the mirror, to be more precise.
Yeah, Umezawa's Jit is a very, very strong card in the Death and Taxes mirror.
That's right. So Mark has played Delver in the past, from what as far as I know. However, as this is Steven's list rather than his own, looks like he's having a little bit of trouble with exactly what to bring in or possibly what to take out. Martin's just finishing up now, and hopefully it shouldn't be too much longer till we've got it underway again. Now, was the Death and Taxes mirror, I believe, was that we just referred to, was our second camera game, so it's just this one that we've got going at the moment. And we'll just see exactly how this plays out. Just presenting the decks now.
Yeah, so from what I saw, it looked like Mark did end up shuffling in the Marsh Casualties as well.
Okay. Definitely an interesting choice. As I said, it doesn't really hit that many cards. Martin, on the other hand, as we saw, can't actually answer a Death and Taxes anywhere in his list outside of an Ensnaring Bridge. So,
True Name Nemesis?
The True Name Nemesis, sorry,
Yep.
You are correct. Sorry. So, essentially, he can either hide under a bridge or just try and get there first, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, given that a Resolved Blood Moon stops Mark from actively casting True Name for the rest of the game,
That is definitely a main deck answer as well. I did forget about that one. And shuffle up and presenting. And I So in terms of the other matchups that we've got floating around in the top 8 at the moment, outside of the two Death and Taxes players, we've also got a Sneak and Show played by Jared Alsop. He's playing against Death and Taxes, so not one of the best matchups for that particular game. And otherwise, we've also got Reanimator. So it was Reanimator versus Sneak and Show, and we had one other matchup which I can't remember off the top of my head.
Which was Rug Delver versus D&T. So the same matchup that you saw
last round. And the same players again, in fact, Jesse Dent playing Sean Brown.
Alright, so it looks as though
They've shuffled
Martin
up.
has gone to 6 and Mark's kept his 7.
Yeah, he's only got a Chrome Mox and a Chalice of the Void there. Chalice not even being a mana source, so doesn't look like that one's going to be a keep. Unless I didn't.
Nope, that is a keep.
That is a... Oh, sorry, there is a mountain in the hand. I just didn't see it earlier. So he has brought in Sulfur Elementals. That's interesting. But they don't do that much against Mark's Death, but they will give him the option of just being able to play a more creature-based game of Beatdown. Leads on a Chalice on one, and Mark responds with the Force of Will very quickly.
Yeah, could not snap that one off fast enough. We're very happy to see the Chalice that locks out about 60% of the deck right in the bin.
Yeah, obviously the sideboard card, the Braid is still active there, but it's not something you want to be seeing, and definitely not early on.
No, definitely not. And this way Mark can probably jam his early Delver, aiming to flip that and get an aggressive clock as early as turn 2.
Absolutely, and we see him play that up. No second land from Mark's side, so we'll have a look at exactly what he's got to follow up on this with. And Martin just didn't draw a land, but did draw a second Chrome Mox. So getting rid of the Sim Prodder, one of the better cards in the matchup.
So
and
I have a feeling this is going to be the Blood Moon. Yep.
That's the Blood Moon. So
which is going to run into a Daze.
Just going to run into a Daze. And that's Martin Hellbent very, very early on in this game. And Mark will definitely be able to leverage that to his advantage with the two Delver of Secrets that he's got in his hand, as long as he can just flip them up. Mark didn't manage to flip the Delver this time. He's drawn a Wasteland, which isn't very relevant in this deck, in this particular matchup, but he's just decided to hold it back in hand, and we'll see what happens here. And puts the coin on top of the library to make him remember what's going on, and draws a land. This is not where Mark wants to be.
He does have a Ponder in hand, though, so we're probably going to be seeing that and hopefully setting up some sort of flip for the Delvers.
Yep, sounds good. Ponder sees Tombstalker, Force, and a Braid. Would love to just... That's got to be really good for Mark, and you might even just use it on one of the manas, on one of the Chrome Moxes on the other side of the board, considering that Martin is a little bit light on mana at the moment. The deck wants to be operating at 3 or 4 mana, and if you can get him back down to 2, then that sounds like a good place for Mark to be.
Definitely, especially given that Martin is playing off the top. Mark chooses to only attack with one of his Delvers there. But it appears that Martin has drawn a relevant threat.
Yeah, so we've got a Goblin Gravel Master, and that's going to attack for 1/1 and offer Mark the trade there. It's interesting, I'm not 100% certain who would have the faster clock if he decides not to block this here, which he has gone to 17. Martin can probably win in about 3 turns, and we see the Abrade there. That is...
So
extra Delvers.
Here we go.
So we flip both of those. Yeah, so it's the question whether he wants to turn off some of that damage early on and get rid of the Goblin Rabble Master, or whether he wants to try and, as I said earlier, mana screw Martin and just keep him into the early game.
I think Mark's probably just going to kill the Rebel Master and stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
Because he has got an aggressive clock. Martin's dead in, 2 more turns if he can't deal with these Delvers on the board.
Absolutely, and the marsh casualties, not the marsh casualties, so the only real out that Martin's got here is going to be the Fiery Confluence, which he would need an extra mana, so he's got 2 cards that he needs to top deck in a row to be able to deal with these Delvers.
An Ensnaring Bridge would also get him out of it for the moment.
That's true. So Mark's holding up a Forcible, but he doesn't have a
Blue card to pitch
to it, so just plays out the Death Ride instead, and he can use that to do the last few points of damage if a Ensnaring Bridge does come down.
But it looks like there's the hand, and that's the match.
Yeah, so not quite as exciting that second game as that first one was. It just shows what the strength of a well-placed Forcible against the Stompy type decks can be, though.
Yeah, Stompy decks, while powerful, are very inconsistent, and will sort of crumble to consistent counterspells and interaction.
Absolutely. So with some of the later builds of Dragon Zombies that we've got have had just a bit more card draw with Simpotter and Chandra, Torture Defiance, but didn't really see any of them those games, and they were dealt with quickly when they were. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. We will see you next round for the top 4.
Thanks for that. See you.